What up, everybody? Before I go any further, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone else if you're enjoying the information you're getting from these videos. So today we're going to talk about how to deal with low back pain. There's several different things that could be going on if somebody's having low back pain. So we're going to specify today's conversation specifically on if the low back pain is stemming from or a result of weakness somewhere else. So what I mean by that is, because I've definitely experienced this having clients at different jobs, from working at a physical therapy site, where people will come in and they'll have low back pain all because they have weakness in typically 3 different areas. Not necessarily like the person could have it in one of these areas, all of these areas, 2 of these areas, somewhere they're having weakness, which is causing them to have low back pain because their low back's having to work harder to deal with the situation, to function normally, or to do what their daily activities or job entails. So that could be you could be suffering from weakness in your hips, weakness in your abdominal muscles, or people would consider the core muscles, or weakness in other areas around the spine or the back, the rest of the back. So what we need to understand is what muscles specifically, or at least generalistically, are we referring to when we talk about each of those areas that you want to focus on, and then how to improve those areas, and of course why this could be causing it. So if you're having weakness somewhere else, your body's going to adapt just like anything else. We're going to adapt to get the job done. Our body is designed to adapt, to evolve in figuring out a way to accomplish the task. So let's say you're trying to lift something off the ground, lift a box. Your body is going to be like, oh, we're going to get it done. We're going to stand up with whatever it is, and we're going to position it. If we got to put it up on a shelf, we're going to figure it out. Even if that means you got to arc back to lift that box over your head, if that means you have to round your back to pick the box up, what it may be. I want to quickly preface, I am not saying that rounding your back is always dangerous, and I'm not going to say that arching your back or extending your back is always going to be dangerous. So don't think I'm saying that. Don't fear those positions. Just potentially your back is trying to do more of the job. Your low back, I should say, is doing more of the job than it needs to. So with that being said, your weakness in your abdominal muscles, that could simply be from just again, like I said, your rectus abdominis muscles, which is what everyone considers your abs. When they think of your abs, they're thinking the awesome looking 6-pack. That's the rectus abdominis. Then you have, as well as part of the abs, is your transverse abdominis. So that is, in other words, think of like the human corset of the abdominal muscles. That's the ones that is going to give you that flat stomach look. Also help with the diaphragmatic muscles, again, of course, are involved as well. Breathing in, breathing out. Expanding the abdominal area, and of course bringing it back into shortening it. With that being said, your obliques also, a lot of people will consider as part of the core muscles. Your obliques are your side muscles, or where a lot of people will consider like where their love handles are. It's underneath the love handles. So that's your obliques. You got to move and stem towards the back, where you get the muscles that do help support and the function of the spine and just hold everything together. So you have your spinal erectors, which align all the way up the back technically. That does 9 times out of 10 when someone is talking about when they feel muscles in their low back. That is the spinal erectors. They do definitely do exist in the low back, but they do stem all the way up the spine. Think of them being the rods, or if you see someone with that big dip into where their spine is, and there's just this meaty muscles around the spine, that's your spinal erectors. You also have your lats, which most people consider like the wing muscles off to the side to kind of give that wide back look. These muscles definitely are very important in a lot of function of just daily function, and if we're weak, they are definitely going to contribute to other issues. So your lats do attach insertion site. If you're looking at a diagram, typically you see it attached closer to the low back. Some people's insertion sites technically can be higher. That's a good way to kind of understand. Insertion site being where the muscle attaches into the body. There's going to be typically 2 different insertion sites for a muscle. You're also going to have your traps, which are very useful to definitely strengthen, to improve the low back, which will be 3 parts. Your traps involve, or trapezius muscles involve your upper traps, which a lot of people will consider, again, like the ones that make people look like they're yoked. They're definitely up here, the upper part of your neck. You also have your mid traps, which is around close to the shoulder blade area, or the mid back. And then you have your low traps, which is slightly below that, still part of the mid back, kind of where the low back and mid back kind of meet. Or if you want to think the lumbar spine meeting the thoracic spine. With the low traps, they tend to be the weaker part of the trap muscles for a lot of people, just because we don't really look to try and strengthen them very often. Even people who lift have a tendency to neglect those low traps. Now, of course, I'm sticking to naming a lot of the bigger back muscles here. I'm not, and also the bigger named known ab muscles. I'm not really naming all the different ones in there, but if you target these specific muscles I'm talking about, you'll definitely strengthen a lot of smaller ones as well. QL muscles, which are going to think of those to your spine as the guide wires to those super tall electrical towers. They hold it in place to prevent it from swaying in the wind or falling down the wind. So that's kind of the concept of what they do for the spine as well. So we talked about the front side, back side, and the side for the core and the back muscles, the abs, the obliques, and the back, as well as your hips. Definitely strengthening your hips is very, very beneficial to preventing some low back pain. So our hips, or glutes, or butt. So there's 3 different muscles involved here. There's the gluteus maximus, which is definitely the meatiest part, or some people consider the biggest muscle in the human body. That is the main part of the butt. You also have your glute medius, side of the hip. Closer, it gives that good, well-defined butt. If you're looking for where it's on the side around the hip socket, as well as you have your glute minimus. This one is underneath. Or again, I'll try to be nice and throw a graphic for each of these things in the video. So strengthening these will definitely help improve or lessen the chances of your low back pain if it's stemming from other areas, or stemming from weakness somewhere else, or tightness somewhere else. That also can be a problem if your hips are but so tight you could stem into low back pain. So with that, this is also can cover kind of like in this topic, if you're having issues, I remember experiencing this before in the past, where sciatic pain, or sciatica, which is a nerve, sciatic nerve that runs, again, connecting through your spine, all the way down your leg, on both sides. If you've ever dealt with that, that also can be because of tightness in the hips and or weakness in the hips, stemming from various different things. So that can kind of get lumped into this conversation. So with that being said, let's talk about specific movement patterns that you would want to do to strengthen. Again, we want to think baseline and level yourself up. And of course, there is other, like, think of, again, like a building that has a basement. You have the ground floor, which is where I'm going to start talking about. You can, if you're like, hey, I need to regress, there's ways to regress any exercise. Like I tell any client, there's ways to regress it, there's ways to progress it. So definitely keep that thought as well in mind dealing with these exercises. So let's talk about the ab muscles. So we want to work movement patterns that are going to strengthen the abs in every way. So we want to do muscle work that's going to strengthen it. Would be considered like an isometric hold, where you're holding against tension, holding against resistance, so that you can strengthen the stabilizing muscles for your abdomen, for your core muscles, as well as movement patterns. So through movement, we want to focus on what the muscles' jobs do. So we have the ability to flex our spine or round our spine, as well as extend our spine. So now you're probably going, whoa, didn't you just tell me that, earlier lifting things, doing that? Again, those movement patterns do need to be strengthened so that you don't have those problems. So with ab specific movement for flexion, because our abs are going to contract as you perform a crunch. Think of a crunch or a sit-up. They're going to contract. That's flexing the spine or rounding the spine position when you do those movements. If you do them completely through full range of motion, of course, if you're lying on the floor, you can't completely go through full range of motion. But if you do it on, let's say, glute ham raise machine where you can extend back, kind of like you think like what CrossFitters will use to do an ab exercise where you are able to extend back, we're getting into the stretched position of the abs where you're able to extend your spine back. They also have ab mats you're able to do kind of very similar, just not to the biggest degree. So we do want to perform some form of flexion and extension exercise movement pattern for the abs. So that can be, again, like a sit-up to you can think of like a cable crunch, that you could actually in the movement get like the full flexion and extension, and you can also limit those ranges of motion if you are trying to regress the movement and slowly improve range of motion, as well as definitely wanting to do some form of rotational movement, some form of static movement, like I said, isometric movement. So let's get to the isometric movement, because typically a lot of times if you're having weakness in your low back, if it's stemming from just a weak, we'll just use the term that a lot of people like using, core muscles. No, that's again one of those terms. It's like, what the heck do you mean? So when I'm saying core muscles, we're going to talk about just in general the abdomen, the ab muscles, the obliques, those specific muscles, the muscles that help again with the spine. Like the QL muscles. So with that, you can do an exercise like a lot of people will consider like a plank as a basic one movement as well. You can also do movements that's with a cable or band called a pull-off press, where you're going to punch the weight out or punch whatever it is that you're holding out. Normally, there's several different ways you can have it, where you just punch it out, bring it back in, to punch it out, hold for a few seconds, and bring it back in. or however you're doing it, the goal is to not let the weight or band resistance pull you to the side or make you rotate. So you're trying to do an anti-rotation movement. A plank would be an anti-flexion and anti-extension movement, because you're trying to hold that position, not let your belly fall to the floor, not let your hips hike up in the air, that kind of thing. As well as so you have the anti-rotation, anti-flexion, extension. You also now have a rotation movement, so you can add like a cable rotation or wood chops, as a lot of people will consider the name, for various different movement patterns, high, low. You can have just horizontal movement. You also can do movements like Russian twist with a medicine ball, or just with no weight. These are various different exercises that you can do that is going to promote that rotation ability that the core muscles are going to need to be strengthened in. So now let's move to strengthening the back, which I'm just going to try to hit a form of an exercise for different movement patterns. So because we name so many different muscles, we want to focus on things that are going to improve those muscles in regards of the biggest bang for your buck type movement patterns. So a horizontal row is definitely going to be, or horizontal pull, as a lot of people will consider it as, is very good. You can start as basic as lightweight with a cable, to using dumbbells, bands, various different like instruments that you could use to start strengthening the horizontal row position. So you can choose various different ways of doing that, or horizontal pull, type of position. So you need a horizontal pull, you need a vertical pull as well. Vertical pull, think of like a pull down. So we want to strengthen that movement pattern as well. You want to try and stay as vertical as possible, trying to keep the arm straight, etc. Which I'll definitely go in more detail if I break down in videos probably to come, break down specific movement patterns. But definitely doing those type of movements are going to strengthen a lot of the muscles that I spoke about. As well as, because we want to focus on the spinal erectors, like I said, trying to get that stability to the back as well, to the low back. So we want to do some form of hinging movement that is going to really strengthen the stabilizing of the back, trying to keep it straight. So if we want to strengthen that stabilization, which is also going to effectively work the core as well, to a degree, we want to do like a form of a deadlift, which is like your biggest bang for your buck movement, for that type of hinging movement. Any number of deadlift would work. There's not like one that's like when specifically focusing on what I'm saying here. Just any type of deadlift or any hinging motion, if potentially starting with like so many daggone variations, that could work. That's a whole another topic for sure. So outside of that, we want to focus on also other movement. So brain fart for a moment there. Yes, so flexion of the spine as well would be useful for various different people. So low level, not really weighted, again, just gravity. It would be like doing cat cow, or some people will call it cat camel movement pattern, just to go through the ranges of motion for flexion of the spine and extension of the spine. And then you could slowly build upon that to the point of where you're doing a version of the Jefferson curl. And I'm sure I'll have some therapists go crazy cuckoo on this. But that would be strengthening, again, the flexion position of the spine, and being able to improve that to a degree. Again, that's going to be a slow progression into that. You also can do, like I said, the extension position, being able to do various different exercises. You could do, trying to think of the name exactly that a lot of people like using it for, but like a snake pull up, things like that, where you're kind of hitting both things, where you're working an extension, or you can think like you're doing a weighted prone cobra, slowly weighting it, those type of things. So that's those movement patterns. We got to move to the hip. So if it's a hip problem, a hip specific weakness that's causing the low back, you do also want to make sure you pretty much knock out the movement of the hip. So with that, very low level would be doing like a hip bridge on like the floor or a table, where you're pushing your hips up, squeezing your glutes, coming back down. And if you've already built the foundation of working to get your abs strengthened and everything, that should be fairly useful. You can do hip thrust. That would be kind of like moving it up and adding weight, that strengthening that movement pattern. I go back to, again, a hinging movement, which again I just mentioned. You can just do pretty much any form of deadlift that's just really going to be a hinge movement. That's going to strengthen there too. As well as you want to do a squat movement, to where you're really trying to sink the hips deep. There's knee flexion and extension as well going on. So a squat movement, that could be a lunge, that could be literally a squat, that could be a sit to stand, like I mentioned in another video before. So that's various different movements as well. But the hips are complex, just like we've talked about the shoulder. So the hip has the ability to adduct and abduct as well. In other words, abduct, move the leg away from the body. Adduct, move the leg closer to the body. As well as using the hip flexors and lifting the leg straight and pulling it up. So you can do simple exercise of hip three-way, which would also use flexion and extension of the hip, abduction, adduction of the hip. You can move that up and progress that to where you're doing, like you can do side steps, side shuffles, whatever you want to call it. Monster walks is what some people, again, will do as well with bands. You can use machines to do specific movement patterns. Technically, a squat and a hinge are going to kind of hit a lot of this as well. But that abduction and adduction, you can use those machines at the gym. So there's different movements. Those pretty much cover a lot of what you're going to need, from your ab muscles to your back muscles to your hip muscles, to really strengthen and make it less and less of a low back problem and strengthen all the other areas. Real truth is that the goal is that you're trying to find the root cause. And if you're like, hey, I'm struggling, I don't know what to do, and like, cool, I like your video, but I need more help. I need some actual help. Definitely, you can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook. I'll put those in there, and do have a business that you can hit up for some awesome training, for virtual training, that we can give you a program. We can coach you from giving you a program where you run on your own all the way up to where we're coaching you and giving you like actually on screen once a week, to programs for however many days you program and work out, to nutrition coaching, the whole 9 yards. So definitely check us out if you need that help, and until next time.